And true to the name, I really wanted to practice on something that, is always a difficult thing, especially for me. And I think it is for a lot of right-handed hairdressers. It's graduating with the fingertips down. When you work with your knuckle at the bottom and your fingertips at the top, your hand works like a normal wedge. So it feels very natural. But when you graduate on the opposite side of the head, and you have to flip your hand because you're working diagonally and you can't use the same hand position, otherwise you'd have to kind of cut hair suspended from the ceiling, it can be a lot more challenging. So it's something that I always feel that I always need to practice on. So I thought today would be a great practice session. So first tip for me with graduation, and that's what's great about these tripods, they're very maneuverable and very easy to control the head position. I don't want the head upright when I'm graduating. I want the head slightly tilted away from me. Since I am working on the side, I want the chin in a natural position. I don't want it tucked down or tucked up. Chin is in a natural position, but the head is tilted away from me. The objective here is that by tilting the head away from you, it's going to help you to build weight. Now, this is what I mean by my fingertips downside. So you can see I'm working on a little bit more of a contemporary form of graduation, where my fingers don't necessarily start off parallel to my parting. My partings are diagonal back, but my fingers are in a different position because I'm starting off kind of at a line, and I'm going to take that line, slowly rotate it until I get to about this point behind the ear, and then do something that looks a little bit more traditional. It's something I do a lot. To me, it's kind of like a modern interpretation of a firefly type of a shape. So with each one of these sections, I pick the hair up a little bit more than the previous. I only take the previous section as a guide, and I lift a little bit more, and I rotate a little bit more, and my fingers do become a little bit more and more complementary to the parting. Now, here's one of the things that makes working with the fingertips down challenging. You naturally want to bring your fingers to the scissor. And what you have to do is bring the scissor to your fingers. So we all know graduation means that the bottom is the shortest part. And what happens is if you rotate your fingertips up a little bit, you tend to build weight and your lines don't flow as well. Even if you're doing beautiful graduation, I want you to, next time you do a graduated haircut, if you trust me at all, I want you to think about what I'm going to explain right here. We all know graduation is supposed to be shortest at the bottom, but it's sometimes that very last second when we're cutting the hair that we kind of lose the finger positioning. So we come in here. So again, if you watch my hand out in the air, I started here and I elevated, and rotated until about this point. Now I'm right up in here. Now my fingers are more true to the parting. Now this is what I mean. We go like this, and what a lot of people tend to do, and I've watched thousands of people cut hair, is you just do this little twist right here to cut. Especially if you've got, larger hands at all, or you're using larger tools. And truly what you need to do is actually the opposite. Right before you cut, you need to twist it in even a little bit more. So the bottom, I do the comb test. You see how the bottom drops out first? If you do even the little bit, so if you come in like this, and you rotate your hand a little bit like this, which seems really comfortable, and then you cut, when you go to do the comb test, very often the bottom is actually longer than the top. And this is why the graduations don't sit in beautifully, and we have to do a lot of refinement towards the bottom, towards the hairline, towards the outline. So you want to imagine, as I always like to say, that your fingertips are kind of a magnetic, and they're attracted to the base of the skull or the top vertebrae of the spine. And right before you cut, they get pulled in a little bit. They pop in, not out. And again, that takes practice. It's the opposite of what your body wants to do naturally. It took me years to learn it, I thought I was, like I said, I thought I was pretty good at getting graduated shapes in, or at least finding my ways to do them and avoiding certain things that, I thought, oh, that just doesn't work for whatever reason, until I saw another great educator. It was actually a guy called Stacy Broughton, who maybe some of you guys who are watching know him. And I just, I already kind of knew what graduation meant, how to do it. I've been cutting hair for 15 years under, good circumstances. And I just saw him do exactly what I just explained. He came in, he combed it out nicely, and he just said, right before I cut, I always give it a little 10% turn in and come through. So again, I'm practicing the more challenging type of graduation, which is when your fingertips are down. It's always a little bit easier on the opposite side when your knuckles are down, right? Because your hand works like a wedge. But when your fingertips are down, you have to kind of focus that little bit more. At least I do. I wonder how you guys feel about it. Coming in, and again, don't bring the finger to the scissor. Bring the scissor to the finger and give it that little turn into the nape. And it just, with graduation, it's all about how it sits in beautifully. So here, no outline work yet. But you can see where that graduation is, and then obviously later on I would come through and do some detail work here. Today I'm teaching more of a lesson than a haircut, so I'm gonna do different things on both sides because, for really, like I said, for me, what I want to do is practice. So here I'm practicing fingertips down from the front to the back, typically what people would consider a rounder shape. When you work from the front, you usually do that because you want to create a little bit of roundness, which means the weight gets a little bit longer and heavier towards the back just by naturally over directing forward. But being careful not to rotate my fingers flat. I want to give it that really contemporary sharp look. And if I start doing this, first off, I can get a weight line very easily. That's one of the reasons why sometimes the graduation can get kind of steppy. And also it gets, I don't know that it's a technical term, but it's a term that we used to use. It gets baggy. It has like little bumps towards the bottom. And instead of the bottom being the shortest piece, the tightest to the head, it actually has a little bit excess length. So again, I could, if I wanted to, I could start to work on this corner right now. I don't want to do it yet, because it may affect my guideline. I want to get the shape in first, at least in this area, before I detail the outline. I think it's like one or the other. Either cut an outline right at the beginning and then kind of work with it, or wait until you've got your shape in. At least in this case. So here you can see rotation. Beautiful Erica mannequin. Another thing that's great about these mannequins, there's so many things. I only work with pivot point for lots of reasons. Number one, the best quality, the best head shapes, the best hair textures, the most variety and diversity. I can get so many different types of hair textures, density, wave, and they're only doing more and more of that. They've launched a whole new series of textured mannequins, which have been wonderful. And they're also a very ethical company, which is so important to me. I mention it every time. Even though they work in some third world countries with sourcing hair and production, they have vowed to treat their employees ethically and fairly and pay them a fair living wage. And that's been certified. They're certified, I think, as SB 2000. So it means they're certified that they live up to certain standards. And that's important as well. Okay, so coming through, working my way in. And again, I'll just go till I reach the middle here, and then I'm gonna practice another technique on the opposite side. Well, another form of graduation. I shouldn't throw the term around too loosely. Maybe just one or two more sections.
I want to take a minute and say hello to our audience, everyone tuning in and learning with us. Welcome. Michael Wildrice is here with us. He's saying hello, and Kevin is loving how technical you are.
Yes, I think, my background is in very, very technical precision haircutting. First 10 years of my career, I worked at Vidal Sassoon and I was a teacher. After I left, I really wanted to do things differently. And again, thank God for pivot point mannequins, because at that point, when I wanted to say, well, what happens if I pick up a razor? What happens if I use a clipper or thinning scissors or any of the things that we really didn't advocate at Sassoon, but I wanted to try them. And, strangely enough, it's kind of more what I've become known for, at least I think so, is kind of razor cutting and, teaching about the blade. But that's why it's so important for me to go back and practice precision cutting like this all the time because it's very easy to learn. This is like something that it's easy to go away. I can tell you that. When I first left Sassoon and I opened a salon and I got to doing like 50 clients a week, I found myself starting to cut corners. And that's not the hairdresser I wanted to be because, you know, sometimes with this type of work, you think, oh, I just don't have the time. I don't have the focus. It's more about focus than time because, you know, if you're focused, you can get this done in the same amount of time that maybe you would do something less focused. But yeah, so you can see here, this is what I mean by kind of a modern firefly. And this is where I would come in now at this stage. I'd use a little bit of over direction with the wide side of my comb and point cutting. Trying out some new shears today from a shear company in Japan. I'm always, you know, getting to practice and try different tools. These feel beautiful for this type of cutting. There, it's called a Super Gold Cobalt, Super Cobalt. Cobalt's a great type of alloyed metal to make scissors from. So you can see very, very simple. Obviously I might do a little more detail, maybe get under the hairline. If this was, I can come in with just the tip of the scissor and weaken any growth directions as long as I've got enough length to sit on top of it. And I definitely wouldn't overdo this at this stage because it's a hairline and it's short. So that means when it dries, it's gonna move around in lots of different directions. What I will do at this point, before I move on to practice another type of graduation, is come through and cross-check. You know, I'd say probably the simplest way to cross-check something like this is horizontal. You know, if you work vertical, you check horizontal. If you work horizontal, you can check vertical. When you work diagonal, there's, you know, you can go the opposite diagonal, but sometimes you have to be careful because you might be chasing the weight. What I'm getting at is there's multiple ways to check. Sometimes the cleanest, simplest way is just come in horizontally, as long as you understand the elevation and bringing this hair and maintaining that weight. And it looks like I worked nice and cleanly because I was focused, and I got my shape in, and I didn't keep extra weight at the bottom. And that was really what I wanted to work on here when working with the fingertips down, how challenging it can be. You know what, I'm gonna work up a little bit more here before we go to the opposite side. You know, if you've been watching all along, I said this is kind of professionals who practice. It's not so much about a haircut as it is that I wanted to kind of practice a few things today. And the main thing is one of the things I've always found the most challenging in haircutting is graduation with the fingertips down. And when you work on diagonals, you know, if you do everything vertically, which you can't really do everything vertically, but I know some people say, well, I always just graduate vertically, so I can always do it this way. If that works for you, fantastic, because your hand is always a wedge then, and then you can always be consistent. But if you start working on more complex kind of sectioning, at some point you gotta flip your hand over because it's just not possible to do everything vertically. And then you run into, and I can understand why people don't like this position because it's challenging. It's not so challenging when I start off because here I'm kind of adding to the line, but even when I do this, I kind of bring it up a little bit and I bring my fingertips to that same point in. So there's some graduation on that front corner. Next section, it's going to quickly start to elevate more and start to rotate. And see right here, I'm not getting enough graduation. I have to bring my fingertips in. And when you do that, it kind of happens naturally when you're working on the other side, but on this side, the opposite thing happens naturally. So, you know, I've been cutting hair, this is my 31st year of cutting hair, and I still naturally want to do this. So this looks and feels comfortable, it looks like it'll work. But what'll work better for this particular weight buildup is this. And you know, you can always, graduation doesn't lie. When you comb it down and lay it down, it should like seamlessly do what it's doing. And it should all start to kind of move together well. Another thing I did with this mannequin is I prepped it with two of my all-time favorite products that I haven't used in a while. I used some Bumble & Bumble products. I used tonic and grooming cream, which to be honest, I haven't cut hair with in years, but you know, we're working with Bumble & Bumble now. at Hairbrained, which I'm so happy to be doing that because the legacy of hair cutting and education and hairdressing, and of course, incredible products. And I just love the way the grooming cream just kind of keeps this moisture in the hair. Like it's always going to be a little bit damp and languid, which is the way I love hair to be when I'm cutting and styling it. So just very simply, but I wanted to just continue up so you could see a little bit more. The first panel was below the round of the head. The second panel above the round of the head. And then there'll just be a little bit left over on the top, and I might as well go ahead and finish this. I'm enjoying it so much that I might as well. I'm on a roll. Got a nice fluid technique happening, I think. This is one of the original Hairbrained combs. There's very few left. I don't know. Do we have any of these left?
I don't believe so.
So these were combs that we made many, many years ago. I went to Germany with a company called Hercules, who are legendary for making combs. And we got to make a comb with them. It's the only comb that we've ever made. And it's beautiful for this type of work.
Kevin is mentioning that he went to Sassoon in LA in the 90s. It was a great time.
So we may have met, because that was my time. That was my time. I don't know if we did or not, but if we did, hello. Again, not overdoing it here because after the hair was blow dried, we'd really check. At this stage, just because of the nature of the head could be starting to get kind of rounding away from you. So when I check this, I check it over the fingers. You see this little bend? I call this bend and blend. It just helps even, obviously if you've got some mistakes, you should go back and check. But even if you don't, let's say it feels pretty good and balanced, if you do this little check over the fingers as you get closer to the apex of your graduation, it'll help it to just melt in with no weight lines. And hopefully, not that I have anything against texturizing, razoring, but you shouldn't need to do it. You should do it because you want to shatter something or you want to debulk something, not because you couldn't control the line or the shape. Again, and let's just go ahead and finish off this last bit here. So this can be the trickiest bit, right? Depending on what you're doing. I'm gonna come around this way. So I want my section to, again, curve. And it drops out. And this is, kind of the front corner of this side of the shape. Kind of, as I said, just kind of reinventing the Firefly, kind of the nouveau Firefly. If you really know Firefly, they typically tend to be a lot rounder at the front. But here we're modernizing it. You can see I'm using the wide side of the comb, less tension, even tapping with the scissor to release tension. But even then, I do that little pivot to make sure that my shape, because this is graduated all the way through from the shortest piece in the nape to the longest piece in the front. This is one continual angle. It should be. That's what we're looking for.
Leah is mentioning that she used to get her hair done in Santa Monica Academy in the 90s before becoming a hairdresser.
Well,
awesome. We got
I may have been one of the teachers, if you remember a guy with big curly hair and a beard and
possibly having pajamas on.
Possibly having pajamas on. They weren't pajamas, for the record. They were comme de garçon, but most people misinterpreted it and thought I wore pajamas to work. But hey, what can you do? Still using the wide side of the comb, still tapping to release a little bit of the tension, but a lot higher now. Again, knowing how much hair you have in this area is important. I know that this hair is dense, beautifully dense on the Erica. And you see how the hair is kicking and malleable? That is a good sign that the graduation is all lining up. If there are any little bumps or what we call bags in the graduation, then they usually don't line up as well. But here you can see it's all lining up really nicely. Okay, so we're getting to, again, this point closer to the crown, where depending on the hair and what we're going for, we're going to really depend how much weight we want to build. So I know that I don't want this to get too heavy and too cornery. So at the very, very top, above the round of the head, I start to put this over the fingers. And this can be even more difficult because you might want to round it off and I want to be really careful that I don't blast that corner off. So again, kind of follow it up. I always say, like, when it's above the heart, if you don't want it to be too heavy, that's where you need to be really careful. So here I'm like below the heart. I'm like at my waist area. I do my little rotation. Here, still kind of below the heart. Then go back to the fine teeth of the comb now. A little tension. Now I'm starting to get high. Higher above the heart. So it'll be like my transition. I'll bring this up. And then we're getting above my heart. And being careful not to round this off. I want to extend that graduation, but I want to keep the peak on. Sometimes people would call this internal graduation. I try to use as few terms as possible because there's just so many terms. At the end of the day, people just get more confused. I just, what does it look like? What do I want it to look like? Lift more, lift less. Build more weight, build less weight. But that being said, everybody learns differently. And sometimes a lot of descriptive words help. So here we can see, really nice. I'm actually quite pleased because this is a challenging side for me. Being right-handed, fingertips down, can be really challenging. So I'm really enjoying this. And coming through. So again, if you're just joining us, that was my my purpose here. I wanted to, this is called Professionals Who Practice, through our collaboration with Pivot Point. It's something that we've done for many years now, probably close to 5 years. Not just me, but hairdressers all over the world. And the idea being that even though I've been cutting hair for 31 years and I've had a decent amount of success, both with clients and with being an educator, it doesn't mean anything. Learning never stops. You need to keep practicing. And you're always gonna have stuff that's a weakness. So graduating with my fingertips down, I was just doing some clients last week in New York. I still do a clientele. And I was doing something, graduated, a client of mine wanted something really kind of clean and sharp. And I just felt like kind of sluggish on the fingertips downside. And I said, you know what, I really need to practice a little bit. So that's what I'm doing. Always combing that down, looking for the shape.
Why did you decide on the Erica mannequin today over all the rest of the options at Pivot Point?
Great question. I mean, it's Erica. The hair's not extremely long. I could have done longer haircuts than this. But Erica, like anytime you're doing lessons, like for me, shoulder length and above into shorter haircuts, and Erica's perfect. It's affordable because the hair isn't especially long. It's got a good amount of density, but it's not overly thick where you have to be like, oh wow, nobody has this much hair. It's got a realistic amount of hair, and also a smaller skull, smaller head shape. Some mannequins, they just have tremendous head shapes, and it takes twice as many sections. I think, this is smaller for a mannequin, but it's realistic for a human being. So I feel like it's more workable in a lot of reasons. So the hair texture, the head shape, the fact that I respect Pivot Point for their business practices, as well as their education and what they've done in this industry for so long. Family company. So, I think in today's day and age, you vote with your dollars. So, yes, you can just go on Amazon and go, oh, well, I'm just going to get this one because it's cheap. Most of the time, first thing is you're not going to get quality. As an educator, I've showed up many times to classes and thought, well, today's going to be a waste because nobody got a good mannequin. Or maybe they got the mannequin I wanted for me and everybody else got a cheap one. And I'm like, well, this isn't going to work because you just can't learn with bad hair. You can't see what it's doing. You can't make it work. So there you can see the concept of a rounder graduation, starting from the front, working my way back and around, coming in, keeping the corner on the front so it's not a classic Firefly, but very much inspired by what we call Firefly. And I'm feeling, I'm just gonna grab a thing here. I'm feeling ambitious, and I want to practice a little bit on the other side. Something different, similar but different, still graduation, but here we worked from front to back. On the other side, I want to work from back to front, something that, is pretty common. But the same idea. So what I wanted to practice today was fingertips down. So let's do a little fingertips down on the other side. If I feel that you guys are with me, I'll keep going. How we doing?
Yeah, everything's great. Kevin just mentioned that Stephen Moody was his teacher in Sassoon back in the 90s.
Well, yes, Stephen was the principal and was a mentor to so many of us, and he still is. It's just amazing to see Stephen cutting as much hair as he does now. I know he's got his own independent education company, which is fantastic. He's out there doing incredible things and helping a whole new generation of hairdressers. Okay, so it's a subtle difference, right? But starting from the front and working back, you're going to get a rounded weight line, slightly, or it could be more, depending. Mine is subtle. Now, working from the back to the front, I'm going to get more of what we call kind of a triangular, at least some people would. I'm going to take off this excess length because I don't need it. I'm just going to come down here. It'll make it easier for me to work and control the hair. I'll relate it to the opposite side, so it'll be a little bit of the old asymmetric geometric. I can use the guideline from the other side. Now this is, for right-handed people, always tricky. So head position, again, down and away. You want to create as much space here as you can over the shoulder. Now when you come in, again, it's very, very easy to do this and cut. But what happens is the bottom begins to get kind of baggy and heavy. And lots of times this side will kick out or flip out for right-handed people. So we want to try to get it to sit in just as well as the opposite side, just dampening that hair a little bit. So body position, super important, The whole idea here is I have to bring the fingertips in as much as I can. I've got a pretty big torso, so I try to kind of get away from it as much as I can. I'm standing all the way over here. If I was up in here, I could never do it. Everybody's a little different. I don't think it's a one size fits all, but for me, very often it works best to come this way. And sometimes, at least on these first couple sections, to cut kind of what I would call backhand, like so. So when I cut this way, it always pushes out. I mean, look at the size of my hand. You may not have that issue. It's all about knowing yourself. Now, some scissors won't cut as well this way, so you really have to know your tools. I'm testing out some brand new ones, and they feel pretty good this way. Nice and sharp, nice and crisp. Now I feel like I have enough room that I can come in just with a normal scissor position. It's but one of the hardest things about our industry is there's so many things that we're told, what's right, what's wrong. To me, it's always about what worked to get the result that I wanted. It really is. I eliminated the concept of right and wrong a long time ago because what I found, some people would always tell me, this is the proper way to do it. And then sometimes I'd watch till the end, and I go, well, I don't really like the way that looks, or I think it could have looked better. And then I would see someone that maybe did it in an improper way, and I'd be like, damn, that really looks good. So I started to mix and match. Now, I'm not saying that's always that way. Sometimes it was improper, and I was like, now I see why it's improper. And sometimes it was proper. Oh, now I see why it's proper. But you have to decide for yourself. No two pairs of hands are the same, and you got to make it work for you. And, of course, the head of hair that you're working on. So this is that tricky spot. Right in here. It's actually very difficult to hold your hands this way. It's very, if I had $1, I've taught probably, I'll just be conservative and say I've taught some type of graduation like this 5,000 times over the past 25 years of teaching. If I had $1 for every time someone came in and kind of did this and did that, because it's what your hand works like a wedge. You have to have the discipline and the control to almost make it do something different. Use the comb See, the comb is angled in, the fingers follow, and then give it that little pop. So we talked about it on the first side. I want you to imagine that your fingertips are like magnets, and they're attracted to the top vertebrae of the spine. And that little extra percentage in is just gonna make your graduation better, never worse, because it just makes sure that the bottom is shorter and tighter. Now I'm just taking pretty simple sections, parallel diagonal sections. For my over direction, I was back to the previous till about this point here, and now I'm gonna become stationary. So this will be kind of a square type of over direction. That's gonna give me lots of options here on the hairline. You can see I've got extra hair from the way that the hairline goes, but I don't like to let that get me too trapped in too early in the haircut. So using a different approach than I did on the first side. Now this can make a haircut. It can make what we used to call like an asymmetric geometric. Wasn't really my intention. My intention was just to work on, as I said, something that I always feel like I need to work on, fingertips down, graduation. Coming in, use the wide side of the comb to gently kind of displace the hair, and then using a point cutting technique, rounding with the natural hairline or whatever else. I mean, if there's like a little point there, I'm keeping it quite simple. I'm just gonna kind of round. I know mannequins have just perfectly even hairlines. And I'm gonna work my way up into this corner right here. If you are excited about live events, which I certainly am, Hairbrained is back. The Hairbrained Teach-In will be on June 25th here in California at the Long Beach Hair Show. That's known as the ISSE show. So anyone that's going, head over to Hairbrained Pro, make sure you get your ticket. We've got an incredible lineup. I want you to go and check out all the educators that we have lined up. It's basically a 90-minute master jam of incredible education, connection, inspiration. So excited to be hosting that and bringing people together again. Tickets are only $75, and I guarantee you'll have a wonderful time. Next panel. We still got people interested, Cal? Should I keep going, or is it?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, well then I'm gonna keep going. So I'm gonna take another panel here. And again, if you're just joining us, I'm Gerard Scarpesi. This is Erica, my mannequin from my good friends at Pivot Point. And today, I really wanted to practice on something quite personal. It's working graduation with the fingertips down. If you missed the first side, I did that from the front to the back, kind of a reverse rounded graduation because the fingertips are down. And now I'm doing this side from the back to the front. That's the whole idea behind this series, is that, you know, I know I have a weakness with this. I think, honestly, most right-handed hairdressers do, especially if they're not really focused on it. So I need to practice. I was doing a client last week, and on the fingertips downside, I felt really awkward. And I'm like, wow, I haven't really focused on practicing here in a while. So here I am. I'm a professional who practices. So this is what feels normal and comfortable. I don't know if you can even pick that up, right? But if I continue to do this, I'm gonna build weight into this corner and make my graduation flippy and dippy and less sharp. I need to give it that little rotation so that when I take my comb, you can see how it just drops out one like little perfectly. Just taking my sections, kind of emanating off the center at a slight diagonal. The head gets a bit more narrow here, so the over direction feels a little stronger. I've chosen to work a little more squarely. You know, it'll give me more options and weight through the area behind the ear and the side. And to be honest, it is a little easier. You know, when you're kind of coming around from the back, it's easy to kind of lose the shape. Sometimes there's good reason to do it because perhaps you don't want the front to be too long. But in this case, I was really more focused on just teaching this little rotation and using the squareness. So here, this feels natural, but I need to do this. It's like one of those things that, you know, what feels natural isn't always the best thing for the haircut. It's like, It's like a dance. So if there's a specific dance, I don't know many dances, but let's just say one, Kel?
No, but Leah is wondering, can you show the hand rotation better?
So
Okay, so let me try to get in as close as possible.
So if you see this, if you came out and you went, oh, I'm graduating, then you just came out and cut it, you'll get less of a good result than if you take your fingertips and turn them into the actual hairline.
Versus
out. It's always into the head, never out from the head. If you want, that kind of tight graduation that pops. So you always turn in to the head right before you cut. Even, it just becomes like, so I bring it out, I'm comfortable, I've got my elevate, and then that little rotation, boom, 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 boom. And you should be able to see it. Like when you're like this, like, oh, my line is flat, right? But when I go like this, you can see that it's graduated. And I'm not gonna lie, it takes a lot of practice. It's taken me 31 years. And as I said last week, I was doing something like this on a client and I didn't feel like I was nailing it at all. So I'm like, I need some practice. Back, in, right? Feels great, but not great. I want to fingertips in and cut. Unfortunately, sometimes things like this, people almost don't realize that to teach them. That's been my own experience. It's like a little thing that you do that even as a student, maybe you watch it and you're like, something's missing. I don't know what it is, but something's missing. And like for me, I had that aha moment. I'd already been cutting hair and doing it at a pretty high level for a long time. And I saw an educator that I really respected and loved, Stacy Broughton. I don't know if anyone here, old school Sassoon fans, know Stacy. And to be honest, I don't even know if he was explaining it or I just was like on micro focus and I was like, look at that. Look at what he does right there. And then I started to do it. So again, this feels great, but this is better. For me. I always like to say that. Like, you take everything, you try it. I don't think there's a right or wrong. And I don't want you to think, oh, I have to do that. But I do want you to say, hey, next time I have a chance to practice, maybe I'll grab a mannequin and I'll try that thing that Gerard was talking about and see if there's a visible improvement for me. And if there is, add it to your repertoire. If there's not, no hard feelings, move on to the next thing. All this little stuff, these little manipulations, when you start razor cutting, which, is something that I'm really passionate about, this even comes to the next level because these little things that you have to do because the razor cuts in, generally a kind of a blurry or softer way. And if your hand position isn't down and your understanding of the shape, you're going to get something that's nowhere near as defined as it could be. So again, we can see that coming through. Just following through in panels and just getting a beautiful little graduated shape. I always look to see that hair behaves. And this shouldn't be a mess. Of course, there's always going to be clean up here. But if the bottom was the closest part, there's no reason why this should be like chunky. Yeah, that's why you have to be careful when you're flipping it out this way. If you're cutting it out like that, as opposed to cutting it in like that. Unless you're going for something totally different. I always feel like I have to make disclaimers because there is no right or wrong.
Leah is mentioning that this is really going to up her bob game. It's amazing.
Good, yeah. And you know what, Leah, you can watch it again and again here on Facebook. These are saved forever. I've, myself, as well as many other great educators have done great lessons here. We've got probably over 700 lessons. All you have to do is go to our Facebook page and click the live button. Pay particular attention to the Professionals Who Practice series because it's really, you can order this mannequin, this Erica mannequin from Pivot Point International, their website and store, and you can practice right along with it, Feel free to send me some questions on Facebook, Instagram. Always happy to help.
Carlos is mentioning that there are things that you can learn only in the salon, only doing salon work. Absolutely.
I totally agree. I use mannequins to practice without a doubt. And then, or to find a weakness, again, last week I was in the salon working on my clients, and you know, it's been a while since I did a really kind of sharp shape like this, and my fingertips downside I know just wasn't as good as it could have been. So I said, you know what, I need some practice. I need to remind myself of the lessons that I've learned and perhaps discover some new ones. This last little piece here, I'm going to cut one length just to keep that little bit of extra heaviness at the front of the shape. Last panel on this side. I had fun with that, you know, and originally I was just intending to do one panel on either side. So if you've stayed with me, thank you. But I started to have some fun. I haven't used this comb in a long time. Plus this is a brand new pair of Super Cobalt scissors. And I'm enjoying them. Now again, I could come in and do this. But it's going to do a couple things. Number one, it's going to put excess weight on top of my graduation. I would rather rotate it and then even come over the fingers with it. You really got to know the shape and what you're doing to make that happen. And it's going to make less of a weight line. So I come in. This is what I mean, back to that. It could, if for some reason, and we used to do this kind of in the older days when we wanted a weight line or a step, we'd come in like this. I don't want that. So I'm breaking it down. Really thinking about hand. Once I go above the heart, I start to come over the hand.
Sid Sutong just popped in and is saying hello. Yep, and that he's practicing every time we do clients' hair, 100%.
Sid is one of my peers. Also worked at Scissor, went through many of the same lessons. I don't know if you've seen us from the beginning here, Sid, but I think you'll recognize some of the lessons. And I was giving some shout outs to Stacy Broughton as someone who kind of really opened my eyes with graduation. I've been doing a little lesson here about how to, how I kind of got to the point where I felt like my graduation was so much better by doing these little rotations with my fingertips and understanding how to extend and lots of stuff here. But yeah, Sid, if you guys know Sid, you know that he's a brilliant, well-rounded hairdresser. Looks like he either just won. I didn't even know that he did color. He either won or was nominated for a color award over in England, and also has been a frequent guest here, and we're always proud to have him. Keeping that front little bit just kind of one length just to give that little bit of extra weight. So now again, typically, I would really do the refining after this is dry. You know, I should be able to see where I'm at right now. When I comb that down and move it in with the jawline, there might be a few little bits. If she was going to wear this very naturally, I might just do something like that. But if I wanted like really a perfect outline, I would wrap dry, blow dry, and do the detail. So you can see here, we've got the one side started in the front, a little bit rounder. It's such a subtle difference, but you've got that rounder side, and then the one side started in the back, which is a little bit more angled. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I certainly did, which is why I kept cutting. Peace out, and thank you.